Top. This is really important today, and it goes beyond just eating well and fresh food and whatever it may be your ideal diet. It's really about your health. If you think about getting an acid disease, this is really the point where you should start to prevent it. And the reason is simple. If you reach the point where it is a disease, it will be much, much harder to go back and get your health back. Today, I'm going to talk with Daina. She is not only a nutrition therapist, which is a little bit different than a coach and a dietitian, but she's also a gut health specialist. And what the heck is that? I don't have digestive issues, you may say. No matter what, you must have this talk because you could not know it and have a leaky gut, for example. So, if you want to know more, stay tuned because we will discuss those topics and much more today. I'm EGR, and this is Adulthlete. Hi, Daina. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm very happy to have you here because you're a specialist not only in nutrition, which we talk a lot about nutrition on Adulthlete, but especially on gut health, which is something that it's a little bit of a niche. Even if people know about it, it's not so well discovered topic, and we need to know a little bit more to prevent disease and, any kind of nasty issue we could have with the gut. So first question that I have for you actually is how did you start doing this? And so a little bit about your background and what was your inspiration to become a specialist in gut health?
So just like so many practitioners in this field, it's our personal journey that brings us to this. So my background is actually in civil engineering. So that's what I studied in college, went to grad school for civil engineering and, did okay in it, but was never really passionate about it. And then I always struggled with health issues during school. Even though I thought I was healthy, I was eating well, I was exercising, I was sleeping, but I didn't feel good. I was really tired. I couldn't get through a movie, for example. Even if I watched a movie at like 2 p.m, I would fall asleep. So my energy was super low. I had digestive issues. So I would be drinking, in the States, we call it Pepto-Bismol or Tums. It's when you get like acid in your throat. So I used to just drink that from the bottle because I used to have these like acidic burps and I just thought it was normal. And then I had really bad skin conditions. So I had acne. So as an adult, this was in my 20s, I was struggling with acne, which is not normal. So all of this played a part into me trying to figure out what could be going wrong and what can I do to help it. So I went to conventional doctors, I went to estheticians, I went on birth control and all these different methods to try to help my health conditions, and nothing was working. So then I myself started experimenting with my diet, and I just tried to avoid certain foods, for example, dairy, and seeing if that would help. I tried eating more of certain other foods. And through this experimentation, I realized like, oh my gosh, food actually makes a difference in my symptoms. And then I went down the rabbit hole, getting really interested in nutrition, thought about going back to school to become a dietitian, but then discovered nutrition therapy and realized that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do to figure out how I can help myself. And after going to school, I was able to really help my own health, improve my acne completely. My digestive issues are gone. And now that's what I help women with.
Oh, that's super interesting. So, what's the difference? Because you said you're a nutrition therapist, and I heard many terms. There is like nutrition coach, nutrition therapist, you said, and then you can be a dietitian, but general registered dietitian. So, what's the difference between those three roles?
Yeah, so it really depends on what you're wanting to do as a career and what kind of nutrition you're interested in. So dietetics is more of that classic conventional way of approaching nutrition. In the US, it's going to be set by government standards. So for example, we have like My Plate, the food pyramid, eat your whole grains, eat this many servings of vegetables, a little bit of Coca-Cola is okay, but don't go crazy. It's like government set guidelines, which is a fine way to practice nutrition. And it much more deals with medical nutrition therapy. So, for example, you work in a hospital setting, you work with patients who have diabetes or heart disease. So, that's more of what a dietitian does. A nutrition therapist is much more, first of all, getting people into optimal ranges. So you don't come to me necessarily with some kind of full blown out disease. You're coming to me, for example, because you have acne and you can't figure out why it is, or you want to understand how to have more energy from your food, or you're an athlete and you want to understand how to hold muscle mass or whatever it might be. So it's more of finding that optimal state and then using a much more holistic approach to nutrition and nutrition therapy. So we're talking a lot about whole foods. We're talking about everything from like, how do you get more probiotics, polyphenols? How do you make sure that you're eating enough protein, but we're not over there like counting macronutrients, for example, like weigh all your
Hmm.
food. In some situations it's important, but we're much more how to find the perfect diet for you so that it's intuitive.
Okay. So, and because people, I think they are a little bit confused when they need to find someone who supports them. And I'm always thinking, okay, you look for a coach, but it's also true that becoming a coach is like something you can do very fast, like in terms of education. So you never know who you have in front of you. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm a coach, but like you have like, I don't know, 1 year of experience, and it's maybe you're fantastic, but you don't know. So, what's like in terms of time and education that you spend on each of those roles? What's the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, so becoming a dietitian is going to be a full out degree. So you're going to school, you're going to graduate school, you're getting licensed, you're taking an exam. That's a very high education route. The middle ground is what I did, which is nutrition therapy, and that's a certification route. So it still took me a little over 2 years to finish school. So it's not like having to go back to school and get a whole new degree, but it is intensive. I mean, it took a long time,
Yeah.
and we learned everything from anatomy and physiology and nutritional biochemistry all the way through pathology. So we got a really good education, and it's all science based. And then the
Yeah.
third level, which is sort of the easiest level, would be more of that nutrition coach typically. And that can be as simple as like 2 weeks of a certification online that you just sort of get a certificate. So I would say if someone's looking for a nutrition anything, someone to help them with nutrition, look at their credentials and kind of get an idea of how much education do they actually have behind them.
Yeah, that sounds pretty eye-opening because I did not the difference between those three terms. And yes, you go to a dietitian. I think it's the first step, but more if you really have some disease or you're really overweight, so you go
Mhm.
there. But on the other side, it may not be the first route. So it's good that we made a distinction between coach and therapist. It's really distinctive ways.
Yeah.
So what is then, because I guess you can be a therapist as also a coach, but you could have like different directions. What's your philosophy?
I very much focus on as much variety as possible for my clients. So, in the end, I want my clients to be eating as many possible foods as they possibly can, coming from mostly whole foods. So, I don't like to restrict. So, for example, some people will want to follow a paleo diet. So, you're eating no grains or dairy. Other people will come to me being vegan. So, they're not eating any animal products. I like to approach it as a much more omnivorous diet. So, eating a little bit of everything, but focusing on nutrient density. So really focusing on getting a lot of fiber from your fruits and vegetables, getting a lot of high quality protein from well-raised animals. So sort of a little bit of everything is really the philosophy I follow, and just minimizing processed foods, which is so hard in the modern day because so much of our quote unquote food is coming in packages and it's not even food anymore. So really reserving that for, I say 90-10. A little bit of that is fine, going out to eat and having that more so fast food once in a while for convenience sake, but trying to really get most of your food coming from whole food sources.
So let's go to processed food because you mentioned that. I remember when I was researching a little bit the topic, and I'm no expert, of course. There's like big difference between high processed, ultra processed food, and normal processed food. And I did discover that actually tuna in a can, it is processed food. And I was a little
Mm-hmm.
bit disappointed because I'm like, oh, I thought this was like super healthy. And okay, it's good. It's fish. If there's not too much oil, it will be healthy. But it is processed food, and I think we do not understand how far you can actually go, because there's so many levels of processed food, that even like a simple thing could be, unless it's, I don't know, something completely fresh. So can you explain a little bit the difference?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's very much a difference between processed food and ultra processed food, because what you want in a processed food is still to recognize the ingredients. So yes, you look at a can of tuna, you don't see a fish head and, the scales, obviously, but you can still recognize it's a food substance. Like, okay, that looks like the inside of a fish if it were cooked. So it's processed, but really those kind of foods aren't things you should be worrying about. Or for example, frozen foods, because I mean, clearly you can recognize what a frozen strawberry is or a frozen green pea, but it is technically processed. It's not in its natural environment anymore. It's put into a package, it's processed in some way. The foods we want to be concerned about are those ultra processed foods where you look at it and you don't know what the heck could be the ingredients. So whether that's a cookie or a chip or a cracker or prepackaged meals where you look at the ingredient list, you're not recognizing things. That's what we want to be concerned about mainly. And for the just normal processed foods that you're eating, just making sure they're high quality. So for example, tuna, I mean, I wouldn't advise you to eat tuna every single day for many reasons, but an occasional tuna from the can, as long as it's high quality, oils are high quality. It's, the brand is making sure that they're not overfishing, checking for heavy metals, all those things. So there's so many things to think about as a consumer. So there's a difference between just a tuna from a can that you buy at a gas station and tuna from a can you buy at a really high-end shop that the brand has done its due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like if you rather eat less than usual, like for example, I used to, now I'm buying some tuna in the glass, like
Yeah.
in the glass, and it's so much better. But of course, it's more expensive, but I'm gonna eat less than usual. But it's still, it is better. You can feel the difference. So quality over quantity,
I
I
love
would
that.
say.
That's exactly, I wish everyone followed that principle because that's what it's all about. Like, eat out one time less a week so you save some money there and then use that money to buy nicer tuna or, organic or ecological vegetables, whatever it might be, but finding the ways to do exactly that, quality over quantity.
But I love the idea. I never thought you have to be able to recognize the food you're eating. I never thought about this. Like you have to be able to see the fish, you know, because eventually the processed food is basically anything. You can even do processed food at home. Of course, it will be different. But if you start like mashing things up and just crashing all the ingredients, you're basically changing them. So that is the process that happens in the process, basically. Okay. So, and the frozen food. So, how is it better than fresh food, or I don't know? Should we just stick with fresh if we can?
Honestly, having some frozen food can be beneficial because certain things, like, for example, berries are a really good example. They're picked and frozen at their peak ripeness. So they're not picked 2, 3 weeks before they ripen, like strawberries. They're probably picked when they're pretty much green. And then by the time they get to your grocery store, by the time they get into your fridge, by that time they're finally red. But at that point, they've lost a lot of that growing time where they could have continued gaining nutrient density. So whereas the frozen fruit is picked when it's really red and really sweet and really delicious and nutrient dense. So in that case, it could be really beneficial. So don't be buying strawberries in, November, December, January when they're not in season, and instead buy them frozen if you want to eat strawberries.
Yeah, that's really logical. I never thought about the fact that. So I thought about for example, the logistics that while they're being transported, of course, they could lose some nutrients, but I never thought about them not growing until the ripe point. And so basically losing all the energy from the soil, all the vitamins and so on. This is a pretty good insight, I would say. I
Yeah.
will think about next time that I
Yeah.
go to the grocery shop. Absolutely. So let's go a little bit into the gut health, because I think many people don't really understand why is this so important.
So we are coming out with more and more evidence of how crucial good gut health is. The gut microbiome turns out it does much more than just regulate your digestion. There's so much connection between other parts of the body, and there's even names for it. They call axis. So for example, the gut brain axis, the gut skin axis, and that just shows us there's a bidirectional relationship pretty much with everything you could think of. So gut health is really important for that microbiome diversity. It just really regulates so much in the body. So that's a really big piece that people need to understand. Until you have good gut health, you could be suffering with symptoms that seem to be nothing related to gut health, like brain issues, like anxiety or depression. I don't think the normal person thinks, oh, I got to work on my gut health because I'm feeling anxious. But actually, that's what you should be thinking about. It's pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Of course, we know about this connection because we've been talking about this more and more in the last years, but we still lack I would say, the full understanding to connect it immediately. So you don't even take it as one point to consider, or the first point to consider, maybe, right?
Really?
It's I think it's because it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Especially people don't think about their gut health unless they have digestive issues. If they get gassy or bloated or they have diarrhea, then it's like, oh, there's something up with my gut. But oftentimes I have clients come to me and they say, my bowel movements are great. I never get gassy or bloated. And then we run some gut testing and it's like, holy crap, your microbiome is out of whack. And that's why you're getting those joint pain issues or migraines or acne. You don't have to have digestive issues for your gut health to be off. It depends sort of genetically what you're predispositioned to.
Oh, that's crazy. So which kind of testing do you usually do?
I really like to run stool testing. There's tons of stool tests out there, so you just really have to be cautious about using ones that are pretty much well evidenced and practitioner based. So not just ordering a random poops test off of the internet, because you just don't know what they're doing and they just might have really fancy marketing. So a good stool test will look at typically DNA material. So they're looking at the actual composition of your gut, everything from good bacteria, bad bacteria, parasites, yeast overgrowths, and really understanding what's going on. And it's a snapshot of your colon, of your large intestine, because that's where your stool forms. So it's limited in that sense. You don't know what's going on in other places like your stomach or your small intestine or sort of your liver, but you do know what's happening in the colon. And that's where that microbiome lives. So when we talk about the microbiome, it's in that colon area, and that's what the gut test is showing us.
And what happens if I go to the doctor and I ask for it?
So the doctors will typically run very basic stool tests looking for those more classically known pathogens like a parasite or H. pylori, which is a bacteria that can overgrow in the stomach. And what they're looking for are levels that are very pathogenic, where they know, okay, if you have H. pylori, it comes up positive, we got to use medication to get rid of it. Whereas a more practitioner, sort of a more holistically leaning stool test will look at all levels. So for some people, even a little bit of H. pylori is going to irritate them and cause symptoms. A normal stool test that you run through your doctor might not find it. They'll say, oh, you're negative. I have that all the time. Clients come to me and they're like, I did an H. pylori test with my doctor. It came back negative. We run it and I do find it. We go on a protocol and then all their symptoms go away. So it just time after time, it shows like there are levels that for some people aren't damaging and don't cause symptoms, but for some people, even a little bit of that, for example, H. pylori will cause symptoms.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, the fact that I've also went so many times to a doctor and they've done a bunch of tests, different things, and they always come back. They always come back. Everything is fine.
You're fine.
Everything is fine.
So frustrating.
But, I have like fatigue and I don't feel like, and then I feel, okay, maybe I'm just like hypochondriac. Maybe I'm just like thinking that I have something, but I don't. Like it really messes me up because I know I may have something, but because they have such high levels that only detect real disease, they don't care about prevention or possible disease that are coming in the next years. Then they just tell you that everything's fine. And I also heard people at some point, they go to the doctor and it's too late. And the doctor will say, oh, why didn't you come here earlier?
Yeah. Right. And it's going to be like, well, last year you said I was fine. And
yes.
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's why I really like that idea of optimal ranges. So I do this with blood work too, because I do blood work with my clients. So there's ranges in conventional medicine that are disease state. So it's like it's flagged on your blood work, like you're too high, too low. But at that point, you're in a disease state. You're like diagnosable. So I'm looking for different ranges where if a person's slightly high, slightly low, we talk about like, oh, this marker is a little high. We should start addressing this before it keeps going up. So it just seems to be like, I feel like it's common sense, right? But that's not what doctors are for. And that's okay. They're there for those acute conditions, diagnosing disease when things are really bad. They're life saving. But I like to work with people who are like you, concerned about their health. And they're like, I don't think fatigue is a normal symptom. I want to understand this. So a doctor's just not equipped with the time to be able to help every single person with fatigue. So that's not what they're there for. But that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and I think the most important point to stress is that yes, you can wait until you reach the point of the disease, but then it's not 100% reversible. Because
Right.
once you reach that point, you don't know if you can go back and
Yeah.
if you
And
can
it's so much
maintain.
harder.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like I would say it's like you're gaining like 20 kilos and like you wait to be overweight to go to the dietitian
Yeah.
when you could just go there when you just gain it 5 kilos and then like
Yeah.
it's easier to go back to your normal weight, right? It's
That's such a
exactly the
good
same.
example. Exactly. Yeah. And right. And then in a disease state, you're not feeling good. You're tired. You don't have the energy to focus on your health at that point. So it's so much harder. So definitely once your body talks to you, and that's what I tell clients all the time, it's sort of it's the silver lining of coming to work with a practitioner like me. It's like, you're lucky. Your body's telling you that something is wrong. Let's nip this before it gets really bad. Other people will ignore it or they'll take medication to hide the symptoms. It's like, that's not going to benefit you in the end.
Yeah, and it will give you like a wide range of side effects which you have to temper with more drugs.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah, and then you're in the cycle. So I don't,
Exactly, then
yeah.
it's over. Game
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting term that I discovered recently with you. It's a leaky gut. What is a leaky
Yes.
gut?
Yes. So leaky gut is more of the sort of colloquial term for it. The official medical term is intestinal permeability. And there's tons and tons of research papers on this. So it's for sure a real thing that happens, even though some people still don't believe in it. But what leaky gut is, it's basically when your gut lining becomes leaky. So toxins and bacteria are able to pass out of your digestive system into the rest of your body. So this is when the problem is when this happens, when things that aren't supposed to be in your bloodstream get into your bloodstream, like undigested food proteins, right? That's not supposed to get into your bloodstream. Things that are supposed to get in your bloodstream are things like electrolytes or certain nutrients, because that's how we absorb the nutrients from food. But everything else is supposed to go through our digestive tract and then you poop it out. So leaky gut is when the lining becomes leaky and those bigger proteins are able to get in. And that's when people get symptoms. So when people say I have food sensitivities, it's very much related to leaky gut. Every time they eat something like zucchini or almonds, they get these weird symptoms. It's likely because there's that leakiness in the gut lining and the proteins of the zucchini or almond are going into the bloodstream. Your immune system sees it and is like, alert, alert, what is this foreign thing in my bloodstream? And then an inflammation cascade begins.
So it's a little bit, it's pretty much like when like a woman has a child, like she's pregnant and there are diseases that can be spread. Just, the blood vessels could be so close that something is going through from the mother to the child, basically.
Oh, I've never thought about it in pregnancy. So I'm not sure about exactly how that would compare, but yeah, that's a whole other beast of talking about food sensitivities. The great thing about pregnancy, well, great thing, is that often your immune system gets really dialed down because you have this foreign object inside of you. So your immune system obviously doesn't want to attack it. So a lot of women, especially who have autoimmune diseases, they'll say that they completely went into remission because their immune system really
Really?
calmed down because
Wow.
it doesn't want to be fighting to hurt the baby. And so they can eat foods they're not able to eat. Their symptoms go away. They feel amazing. And then when they give birth, the immune system riles up again and then their symptoms come back. But that's interesting.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that. Interesting. So how do you make the line like thicker? Because I understand it's because it's too thin. And what makes them thin, first of all, and how do you counteract this?
So leaky gut in general is caused by the modern day diet. So processed foods, including sugars, also environmental toxins. So things like pesticides that they spray on our produce can
Mm.
cause leaky gut for those junctions to open. Everything from stress, alcohol, antibiotics, infections in the gut like parasites or yeast overgrowths. So many things can cause that lining to become disrupted, which is why it's sort of epidemic. I mean, most people, I would say, have some kind of level of leaky gut. So what we want to do is really focus on healing that gut lining. And that's getting rid of foods that are not helping you, reducing alcohol, ideally eliminating it while your gut's trying to heal, getting rid of all those toxins, whether it's pesticides or antibiotics that are disrupting your gut lining, and then introducing certain supplements, for example, that really help just calm the gut lining.
Okay. But I'm wondering now, how do you know it's because of that and it's not because of something else? Is there a test?
Yes, there are tests to understand if you have leaky gut. It's basically looking for a protein called zonulin to see if it's leaking out into the stool or bloodstream. So you can test it. Honestly, when I work with a client, no matter what, we're going on a leaky gut protocol. So we're working on healing the gut lining, making sure that it's strong. So we don't have to run that specific test typically, because really, I'm just going to assume if you come into me with gut issues, you have some leaky gut.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense because if most of the people actually have it, then anyway, you're gonna fix the diet, and this is something you already do by default. So
Yeah, exactly. And it's
it's
only beneficial to work on the supplements and then increasing your variety of fruits and veggies and eating different proteins and collagen and bone broth, all the things we talk about for a healthy gut. All of that's going to be helping with leaky gut.
yeah, yeah. So I heard that there is like, so we said about recognizing the type of food you're eating. So you see a fish, you see, I don't know, like you cannot see the cow, but
Yeah.
somehow right, you can see the one piece of the cow,
Yeah.
recognizing what you're actually putting into your mouth. Um, is it something that we can compare to the ancestral diet in the sense of, the term?
Yeah, very much so. And I think that's maybe an easier way to think about it for some people. Just thinking about what your great grandmother would have eaten. So 100
Hmm.
plus years ago, because back then, I mean, processed foods were basically non existent. So it really was during the wars that they started doing things like canning and other ways of processing food. So we didn't have refrigeration back in the day. So we had to eat all real foods. So really the ways of preserving foods before would be things like fermenting, so using salt and making sure that the food ferments itself. That was really the only way of preserving foods. So I think an ancestral diet is a really good thing to focus on. What foods existed back then? And it was basic. It was animal proteins, whether that was cows, beef, poultry, fish, eggs, things like that. Fruits and vegetables that you recognize, and even things like grains should be minimal because grains can bother a lot of people and they are processed to an extent. So they come with some fiber, but honestly, not everyone tolerates grains very well. So really, the ancestral diet is a good way to go about things.
And I'm thinking, so should we consider, because now we came to the point where we do have processed food that it's with good ingredients. So you have those chips, and then you read the ingredients. Everything it's like organic, whatever. But it's somehow you can recognize comparing with other kind of chips. There are very bad ingredients and so on. But is it about the ingredients only, or should we just be concerned as much as with those good ingredients than we are for the other type of processed food?
Such a good question. Regardless, if you recognize the ingredients on a processed food, like you were saying, the example of chips, it's going to be better than the other chips that are full of chemicals and ingredients you don't recognize. So if you had to choose between the two, the ones that are recognizable ingredients are going to be the better chip, but it still is processed typically with a lot of carbohydrates because that's what snacks are. It's not appealing to do a lot of like high protein. It's going to be a lot of carbs and fats to make something taste palatable. And it is processed that the body absorbs it differently. You even look at something like eating almonds and then eating almond flour. So almond flour is broken down because it's ground up almonds, and your body's going to process it a lot faster. You're not doing the work to slowly break it down through your digestive system. So that makes a difference. The body doesn't see it as an almond anymore. It looks different to the body. So it's still processed, even though the ingredients could be beautiful. It could be like almonds and cauliflower and all the things, but because it's going to be broken down, pre-digested in a way, your body's not going to be reacting to it as it would to the full whole food form of it.
But that's such an interesting concept. I never thought it this way, that you have to allow your body to do the process and not buy something that is already processed outside of your body.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. That's something I will definitely remember next time I go try buy some junk food,
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yes. Interesting. What about fermented foods and probiotics? Because so I use probiotics, but I heard so many different things. And of course, I would love to eat kimchi every day instead of popping down a capsule in the morning. But it's a little bit tough to find kimchi or to have, homemade kimchi every day or whatever other type of food I could have. So how should people decide?
I think probiotic capsules are a really good insurance policy because the environment we live in today just isn't what we used to live in. And that'll be an argument that people make like, oh, well, my great grandma didn't take probiotics. She didn't need them. It's like, well, yeah, she lived in a very different world. We are now have so many chemicals, so many toxins. Even if you eat organic food, you're still going to get trace amounts of pesticides. There's chemicals in our water, all the things. We're surrounded by toxicity just because of the modern world. And your gut suffers because of it. So you would have to eat insane amounts of sauerkraut and kimchi and yogurt to get those high dose probiotics. So I think that eating probiotic foods is really beneficial. I think everyone should try to do it at least once a day. But having a probiotic supplement, especially if you're someone who struggles with gut issues or you just really want to keep your gut in the most optimal state, I think probiotics are a really good choice.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I will try to do some kimchi.
Yeah.
Because I heard like this thing, it was really, I still take probiotics, but I was listening. So from an evolutionary point of view, viruses, everything that is in your biome, animals basically fight each other to survive. So the point is like they said, if you are very good, as you said, unfortunately in this modern diet that we have in the modern world, it's a little bit difficult. But if you are consistent with your real fermented foods, then you should not take the probiotics because then they will fight and they will actually create more mess into your intestine than, just choosing one of the two. But I'm also thinking, yeah, but you have to be very good at balancing the amount of fermented foods that you eat. And you have to have them ready. And it's difficult. Also things that they do not last so much. Like I did kimchi once and yeah, definitely I had to eat it at some point. It had to finish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything that you bring up is a really good point because really the way the gut works is every single bacteria in there is trying to outcompete the others for room. So that's why when you take antibiotics and it kills out everything, it kills the good guys and the bad guys. That's why so many people can get issues after that, whether it's diarrhea or yeast infections, because then there's all this room for the pathogens to grow back strong. So what you have to do is really seed the microbiome with healthy strains so that the bad guys stay minimal. I like to think of it as a garden with like flowers and weeds. It's fine to have a little bit of weeds as long as you have really strong flowers. And that's how we've always evolved as humans. We've never lived in a world without parasites or yeast. Our bodies learn how to deal with it. And as long as our good guys are strong enough, those ones can stay really minimal. But it's really hard with those modern insults that we have to deal with every day because then those weeds start to overgrow. So if you're taking a probiotic, it does really matter the quality of the brand. I really like practitioner grade brands because they've often done like third party testing to make sure that
Mm.
those strains work well together and they basically don't cause
Oh,
any side effects. So if you're just picking up any random probiotic that's like on sale or whatever it might be, just, maybe do a little more research, because that could be that kind of problem where then all of the microbiome diversity starts to get out of whack, and maybe things like that, like what you heard on the podcast, can happen. Of the strains are just out of balance because
yeah.
you're putting in strains that aren't supposed to be in those levels, and then your whole microbiome is getting out of balance.
Yeah, and also I heard like when you choose the probiotics, you have to really. So some brands, they tell you, yes, we have whatever X million of strains inside, but they're not checked. So it could be you're just taking
Yeah.
something that doesn't have that number. So it's basically getting less and less quality. Um, and of course, the ones that they do this kind of testing, as you said, third party testing, they're more expensive.
Exactly. Yep. And more is not always better. It so depends on so many
Yeah,
things.
that's also true. So if someone wants to start with fermented foods, like for me, it's been a while that I'm not eating fermented food on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. How do you think it's best to start integrating into your diet?
I think sauerkraut and kimchi are really easy ones to include, especially if you're cooking up some meat, for example, or nice quality sausages, to mix in a little bit of sauerkraut. It has that like German flavor profile, which I think is really delicious. So for breakfast, if I cook up some ground beef or some organic chicken sausages, I'll add just like a scoop of sauerkraut to go with that. One thing that I like to suggest to my clients is, if there's nothing fresh on your plate, for example, everything's cooked, like you have some sausage and some eggs. So you want to add, I like to add something fresh to add some of those enzymes. So that's what a really good idea is, to add a scoop of something like sauerkraut or kimchi. So you don't necessarily need to eat a big salad for breakfast, but adding some fermented foods is a really nice way to balance out that plate. Then yogurt, as long as you tolerate dairy, which is a tricky subject for people who have gut issues. Sometimes you have to cut out dairy for a little bit, but if you can tolerate dairy, full fat dairy from grass-fed cows or organically raised cows is a really easy way to get fermented foods in. And kefir. So kefir is really highly concentrated in probiotics. So you can just do a splash in your smoothie, for example. You really won't taste it. I like to have it with a little bit of chia seeds and just kind of take a shot of kefir is nice. So those are some easy ways to incorporate fermented foods.
Yeah, I like the idea of putting like using kefir for something else, because I do not necessarily like kefir itself, like alone.
Right.
But now it's a good idea. I can put it into a smoothie or
Yeah,
something else that's different taste, but at least I get it.
exactly. Yeah.
So we also talked last time about how the role of hormones in all this. You can be a little bit unbalanced, or you can push yourself to be unbalanced if you don't have the proper nutrition. How does the gut health influence hormones?
One massive aspect of it, which is pretty intuitive for people, is if you don't have good gut health, you're not absorbing your nutrients properly. So if you're not producing enough enzymes or stomach acid to actually break down your food, you're not actually absorbing a lot of those nutrients, which are really important for hormone production. So everything, whether it be like iron or magnesium or whatever it might be, all these really important nutrients that you need for healthy hormones are going to be related to that. Also fats, because hormones are made from fats. So oftentimes women will go on low fat diets, which is the worst thing you could do for hormone health, because then you don't have the building blocks to actually create hormones. So all of that plays into nutrition and gut health. And then a third aspect is the gut plays a big part in detoxifying estrogen. And a lot of hormonal symptoms that women get, like PMS, getting irritable before their periods, having cramps, having fatigue, cravings, all those symptoms are often related to high estrogen, especially compared to your progesterone levels. And that can come from the gut, because the gut plays a role in detoxifying the estrogen. So if you're not detoxifying the estrogen, it basically gets reabsorbed into your body. Especially, I notice this if you're constipated. So women who struggle with constipation, so not going and having a bowel movement every single day, they tend to have a lot more of those hormonal symptoms because of that reabsorption of estrogen.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, because you keep it in. So basically, you're just giving it back to your body, but it's like something you should not keep in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So, and what for a man? What are the symptoms that their hormones? Because we know, I think women are a little bit more educated about their hormones. Not always 100%, but like, what about men? What's the symptoms they could have?
A lot of energy issues will happen for men. So just feeling like you're dragging, fat, like in the belly area where it starts to accumulate. So if you're having a lot of belly fat, that's a sign of hormone disruption. And then all sorts of sexual issues. So like erectile dysfunction, low libido, that's signs that hormones are out of balance.
Okay, so men that are listening, this is, I think, something you will, if you're not caring that much about nutrition,
Yeah.
but you're actually caring about those other things, like watch
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good marketing, you know?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I think it's a little bit overwhelming for people when they start getting back on their feet. Maybe they've been unhealthy. They try to start some sport, and then there's nutrition. And but at the same time, you get hungrier when you start to do more activity. So it's a little bit overwhelming. What would be if you have to choose one thing that you have to do absolutely to start your journey for your gut health and nutrition? What would this be?
Well, processed foods, cutting out those is sort of the obvious one that we've been talking about and switching to whole foods. If there was one thing that was a little bit like higher level of a change to make, I would say focusing on a healthy breakfast, which so many people really don't do. And that's one of the first changes I make with my clients on focusing on protein because so many of our breakfast foods are like toast and some like avocado, which is, you would think, also whole foods ish. That's pretty healthy. It's better than pancakes. But I really like my clients to focus on more protein. And that's not 2 eggs, because 2 eggs is really only like 12 grams of protein. I like my clients to shoot for about 30 grams as their first meal. So thinking about that, that would be 5 eggs, which is a lot of eggs and more than most people can put down, but maybe doing 2 eggs and then a little bit of like organic meat on the side or some beans, something to break it up. But 30 grams of protein is a really good minimum to shoot for. And that will help with your energy levels through the day, with blood sugar regulation, with building muscle if you're an athlete, with mood, anxiety. I mean, so many things change by something so simple of just eating more protein for breakfast.
Okay, let's talk about eggs because I'm guilty as charged. About the 2 eggs, my colleagues who will probably listen to this very well know that some, like, I think it's like 10 a.m. I take out my 2 eggs. So, but I had some controversial conversation about this because I work with a lot of Indians and some of them are vegan. Uh, or vegetarian. It depends on their faith as well. So there's one colleague of mine who actually was eating very often like 12 eggs, and I think he would just take the white, if I'm not wrong, so you wouldn't have like cholesterol high nutrients because you don't have the yellow. But still, like, I was like, are you sure? Like, it isn't too much, like 12.
That's a lot of eggs. I agree. So, what happens when you eat a lot of the same food all the time is sensitivities can develop because you have leaky gut. Your immune system has those egg proteins coming into the bloodstream. It starts to recognize it as a foreign invader. And the next thing you know, you can't eat eggs anymore. So, I always caution people diversity is key with a diet. So, that would be the first red flag. The cholesterol bit, that's sort of, it's crazy that we're still having this conversation because there's plenty of research to say that dietary cholesterol basically does not affect your cholesterol levels because cholesterol is made within the body endogenously. So eating cholesterol is going to be a minimal effect. I mean, maybe for some people if you're genetically predisposed, but it's extremely rare. So that wouldn't be an issue. And actually the yolks have a lot of really important nutrients. Really the whites only have protein basically, which is important, but the yolks have all the fat soluble vitamins. So
Yeah.
that's what, and the healthy fats. So it's a really important part of the egg to eat the whole thing. I also come from that ancestral way of thinking of, an egg is a perfect combo of food. and you splitting it into two pieces, it's
Yeah,
like, that's not natural anymore. Just eating egg
exactly.
whites. It's like, it came in nature that way for a reason. So all that to say, sometimes eating 12 eggs can be fine, but I would suggest for a person like that to diversify their protein sources, just to make sure that those sensitivities don't develop, and just get a gamut of nutrients rather than just something that comes from eggs. If they're vegetarian, so they can maybe lead on dairy sources, using things like legumes, lentils, beans to get a little more protein and diversity.
Okay. But would it be bad if you eat, like you said about, you mentioned cholesterol, but would it be bad if you eat 12 full eggs?
I mean, it likely won't affect your cholesterol unless you're maybe doing it all the time. It really depends on the person. There was a study that just came out. I think it was like a medical student. It wasn't a study. It was a self experiment. I think it was like a Harvard medical student ate, I think it was like 20 eggs a day for a month
What?
to see if their cholesterol was affected, and it completely wasn't. It was totally the
Okay.
same. So
Interesting.
it might be some people get affected, and then we sort of scare everyone and fearmonger. But yeah, I would say that's not something to be concerned about. It's more so food sensitivities and making sure you're getting diversity.
So is cholesterol going up with processed food, or what is it?
So cholesterol usually goes up mainly from poor quality oils and carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates. So when I see clients that come to me with an actual high cholesterol level, their triglycerides will be high, their LDL, which is a form of cholesterol that we don't want to be low, is high. And that's typically not because they're eating lots of healthy high fat foods like nuts and salmon and eggs. They're eating junk food.
Yeah.
So that's why those cholesterol numbers are getting really high.
Okay, interesting. So, first thing, stop with processed food. I think it's the easiest way in the end,
Yeah.
because actually, if you are eating junk food, processed food, sometimes it's very easy to kind of go back with your weight and have a better nutrition, because it's just one thing that you can take out. It's not like you're just eating too much fat, good fats. You just can get rid of that because it's one specific thing, right? And I've seen
Totally.
like some people that really losing weight so fast, just
Yep.
stopping to eat junk food.
Yep. And the thing is, the other problem with junk food, which people don't think about, is because it's so palatable, it basically changes your caloric intake. Like by eating processed food, you unknowingly are consuming about like 600 calories extra a day.
Yeah.
Just because it's so easy to get down, it's pre-processed. It's really hard to get that same amount of calories if you're just eating chicken breasts and broccoli and, avocado and berries. Whereas processed foods, it's so easy to get that excess calorie intake, unhealthy fats, broken down carbohydrates. They're simple. So definitely, yeah, processed foods, getting those out, that alone could be the one nutrition change you make, and your health will improve. You'll end up losing weight. Your energy goes up. So many things will improve.
So, and the same thing, because we said one thing to start for your nutrition, but can we say the same thing also for the gut health, or would you suggest another second point?
For gut health, I mean, processed foods are terrible for gut health. They have things like emulsifiers that mess up your gut lining, which will lead to things like leaky gut. So that's definitely part of it. I say in general for gut health, focusing on plant diversity is a really good step for gut health. So that will force you to eat lots of different types of fiber and lots of colorful things. So I like to tell my clients, it seems so simple, but try to eat the rainbow. Every time you sit down to eat, try to get a couple colors in your plate, because that's showing that there's different polyphenols, or polyphenols are really beneficial for the gut microbiome.
And do you have like a set number of not vegetables, but like I heard, if you include spices into this concept, like how many should it be per day?
Yeah. So there's a study done. It was like a gut microbiome project, and they found that at least 30 plant foods per week was what you want to get in. And that includes fruits, vegetables, like you said, spices, nuts, seeds. So that I'll do that with my clients. I'll have them write down for 1 week, just every single different type of plant food that you ate. And it actually, is very doable once you include spices and everything else. So that's a good thing to shoot for. Try to get 30 different things in your diet. And that encourages you to also shop differently because we still get in the
Mhm.
habit. We have the same grocery list, we buy
Oh,
the same
yeah.
things all the time. Yeah. So that forces you to be like, huh, I never buy endive or I never buy this like random vegetable. Let me just chop that up and throw it in a salad to get to my 30. So that's a good hack.
Yeah, I have no clue how many I have in
So
my
you should
week.
try it. Try to make a list. Yeah.
Yes. That's a very good point. I would definitely start, maybe from Monday, you start writing on the whiteboard in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or like make a note on your phone so it's easy. But yeah, you'd be surprised and then realizing like, oh, I'm kind of low this week. Let me try to pick up a couple things at the grocery store.
I'm pretty sure I'm very low. Lower than I think. Oh gosh. So you focused in the last years on nutrition and gut health. Definitely there's always something changing, and you read a lot of studies, which of course makes it even more interesting along the years. But how do you see your work in the next years?
Mm. Oh, that's a good question. AI is a big conversation I think all of us are having. And that makes me think like, oh crap, like are people not going to need nutrition therapists anymore? But I don't think so because we're in a world where coaching is a massive part of it. Because really anybody could have done their research, looked at the studies, found a diet and followed it. But there's so much more to coaches like me who support people. They're the cheerleaders. We're here for questions. We're accountability buddies. So, I think things will shift because of that. But I think in the end, my job will stay similar because and people want human interaction. I think
Yeah.
we truly do. And having the same advice from a robot is not like getting to know a person and knowing about their personal life and all the things that come with it.
Yeah, I think so. I work in IT, so I know a
Okay.
little bit about it. And we discussed from the beginning what's the impact on also on our jobs, actually,
Hmm.
everybody's job.
Totally.
But the point is like everybody was, oh, I don't like, developers. Oh, I don't like when, people use ChatGPT to code. And yeah, okay, of course, it's a shortcut. And it does not allow you to think through the problem by yourself. And you could be lazy if you want it. But what I expect actually is not to get people lazier. But the people who are actually lazy, they will stay lazy. The people who would love to know more, they actually have a bigger opportunity here. And the same I see it with your job. Like I could come to you much better prepared and use 1 hour with you in a much better way than
Hmm.
wasting maybe like 40 minutes for you to just explain me the basics.
Yeah.
And I could just go higher if I already knew the basics and did a little bit of research, which, by the way, with ChatGPT, it's much faster.
Hmm.
And then come to you with a list of things, with a list of topics, and boom, like so much more knowledge and discussion.
Totally. Yep.
All right. So it was really a pleasure to talk with you. And I am really curious about the outlook in the next years, how it's going to be. Maybe we will have another call
Hmm.
to see how it goes. And thank you very much for joining me today on Adulthood. And I wish you a lovely day.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. It was great talking to you.
Thanks.